Heaven Official's Blessing. Chapter 32. Audio source: WuXiaWorldAudiobook.com. In the Great Martial Hall, Crown Prince meets Crown Prince. Xie Lian knew this ring must be something Hua Cheng left behind. He held it in his hand and looked it over, wondering what it might be. When Xie Lian was still a crown prince, he grew up in Xianle Palace. The Xianle kingdom had always reveled in beautiful, precious objects. Collectors were abundant, and the palace itself was therefore of course glorious and bedazzling. Golden columns, jaded steps, numerous treasures and precious jewels. Even the noble children played around with various colored gems like toys. Xie Lian was used to seeing treasure, and looking over the ring, it seemed to be made of diamond. However, its shape was exquisite. Perhaps even the most skilled jeweler would not be able to craft the ethereal natural beauty it emanated. Moreover, of all the diamonds he had ever seen, this stone was extraordinarily clear, shimmering like a crystal, fascinating and sublime, making it hard for him to determine exactly what it might be made of. Still, even if he couldn't tell what the ring was made of, it was for sure an item of extreme significance. Besides, if it was found around his neck, then this was not something that was accidentally dropped, and more than likely a gift from Hua Cheng as a keepsake. Xie Lian was a little surprised receiving a keepsake like this. He smiled softly, resolved to take good care of it, then asked the boy what the gift meant the next time they meet. The only place he owned was the broken-down shrine. There was nowhere appropriate for him to hide treasure, so after some thought, the best place was on his person after all, and Xie Lian put the silver chain around his neck once more. After returning from running around Mount Yuzhen in the Banyu Pass back-to-back, Xie Lian laid in Puqi Shrine paralyzed for a few days. If it wasn't for some of the overly passionate villagers who'd come and offer buns or porridge, he'd probably stay incapacitated for many more days. It was only until he'd feel himself again that Xie Lian returned to work and run errands. He spent his days thus until one day, Ling Wen suddenly sent him a notice: return to the heavens at once. Judging from her tone, something bad was about to go down. Xie Lian could guess what it might be and prepared mentally. "What's going on?" he asked. "Is this about the Banyu Pass?" "That's right," Ling Wen replied. "When you've returned to the heavens, come directly to the Great Martial Hall." Upon hearing the Great Martial Hall, Xie Lian froze. Zhen Wu was back. After his third ascension, he still hadn't greeted Zhen Wu. As the number one martial god, Zhen Wu spent his days deep in cultivation behind closed doors or was out patrolling the realms, securing the world, and therefore difficult to meet. Now that Zhen Wu was back, Xie Lian must make this trip to the heavens, and so he ascended once more after only so many days of rest. The heavenly court had one main road, the Martial Deity Avenue. Although there were many such roads built in remembrance of Zhen Wu in the mortal realm, they were only mere shadows and copies of the real one in the heavens. Xie Lian walked on through the expansive road and headed towards the heavenly court. Along the way, the many temples of various gods filled the heavenly palace grounds, forming the great city, each different in style and design, exquisite architecture, gardens, sculptures and murals. Spiritual auras drifted about, and on the ground, gentle clouds diffused with each step. En route, there were many heavenly officials in a hurry, and not a single one dared greet him. Truthfully, there was usually not many who would greet him when he visited the heavenly court. However, not greet meant no fellow officials would approach him or initiate any conversation. They would still nod in acknowledgement as was proper. Right now, everyone was pretending he wasn't there, as if just glancing at him would get them in trouble. If they were in front of him, they would hurry away. If they were behind him, they would slow their pace, leaving him a wide berth, afraid to approach. Xie Lian was already used to this treatment and didn't think anything of it. After all, he did just drag down the popular and newly ascended little General Pei. Of course everyone would stay away from him. As he walked, a voice suddenly called out behind him. Your Royal Highness." Xie Lian was shocked to hear his name being called, curious who would still be brave enough to address him at a time like this. But when he turned his head back, the junior official that called for the Royal Highness rushed by him, and ran towards someone who was walking further ahead of him. He called as he ran, "Geez, Your Royal Highness, how can you forget your traverse pass going to the Great Martial Hall? How would you even get in?" So that was it. Of course the address, Your Royal Highness, wasn't directed at him. There's a number of crown princes in the heavens, so some confusion wasn't anything extraordinary. Yet when he glanced over and saw the other crown prince, he paused. That young man had thick brows and bright eyes with a wide smile. This smile was vastly different than many other heavenly officials. It was one that was pure and genuine without anything behind it. It added an air of youth to his handsome face. To have another harsher official, like Mu Qing, to comment, however, he would probably call it an air of foolishness. The young man was decked in armor, proud and heroic. But the armor on him didn't give off a sense of blood and battle, rather it gave him an air of royal nobility, candid and brilliant. Xie Lian stopped in his step and stared at the young man. The two in front felt his gaze and turned back to face him. When the junior official saw who it was, his expression changed immediately. Xie Lian lightly nodded his head and smiled at him. "Greetings, Your Royal Highness." The other crown prince obviously was one who didn't mind the everyday details and didn't recognize his face. So when he saw someone greeting him, he immediately returned it with a bright smile and shouted, "Greetings." The junior official beside him gave him a little push, and hurried. "Let's go, Your Highness. We still need to go to the Great Martial Hall." The young man, still unaware and unconscious, was weirded out by the sudden push. "Why are you pushing me?" Xie Lian puffed out a laugh and immediately schooled his expression. The junior official looked to be in even more of a hurry, and urged, "The Great Lord is probably already waiting for us. Please let's go, Your Highness." The other crown prince could only give Xie Lian a confused look before turning to leave. As they walked away, Xie Lian remained where he was standing. And soon, whispers from officials of a lower rank floated into his ears from afar. "Well, that was awkward. The world is such a small place. But they're both officials in the heavens. It was only a matter of time. If you ask me, General Nanyang bumping into General Zanjin is more exciting an affair." "Ha, what's the rush? They'll be bumping into each other real soon. They're all waiting for him at the Great Martial Hall, aren't they?" Then, someone commented, "Never mind a small world, really it's people comparing each other that really does it. People really are so different from one another. They're both crown princes, but His Highness Taiwan is truly noble, and if it was him, he wouldn't do anything shameful even when fallen from grace. The Yang'an kingdom is more prosperous than the Xianla kingdom after all, so of course the crown prince of Yang'an would be stronger than that of Xianla. How the grass grows depends on the land it grew on. Simple logic. The northern territory belonged to Mingguang Palace, the martial god Peiming. The western Qi Ying Palace was Quanyizheng. The southeast Nanyang Palace was Fengshin. The southwest Zanjian Palace was Muqing. And the one the eastern territory belonged to was the Taiwan Palace, the martial god Lang Qianshu. Lang Qianshu, when he was immortal, was a crown prince like Xie Lian. However, he was the crown prince of Yang'an. The Yang'an kingdom was the country that built over the fall of Xianla, and the founder of Yang'an was the rebel general that successfully sieged the royal capital of Xianla. When Xie Lian drifted in the mortal realm, he had also visited the east, and naturally knew that the crown prince of Yang'an had ascended. As heavenly officials, it would be inevitable for them to bump into each other, so he didn't think much of it. Maybe to anyone else, the gossiping whispers, albeit not really whispers, would probably never be heard for fear of retribution. But those words were uttered without fear of Xie Lian hearing. maybe even hoping for something exciting to happen should he overhears, so Xie Lian pretended to have heard nothing, and casually walked off. Just then, another voice came from behind called, "Your Highness." "Not again?" Xie Lian thought, but this time when he turned around, it was someone who was addressing him for real. Ling Wen, with her two dark-circled eyes and arms full of scrolls, approached him. "Everyone has gone to the Great Martial Hall for the conference. Be more mindful once you've reached the hall." Xie Lian understood. What was little General Pei's sentence? "Exile," Ling Wen replied. "That's actually not too bad. Not too severe." Xie Lian thought. Exile was considered a temporary banishment for officials that committed crimes, meaning the term of punishment was negotiable, and there may still be opportunities for resuming duties. If one day they should be found to be on their best behavior, they may yet get fished up. Maybe in 30 to 50 years, maybe in 100 or 200 years. But to Xie Lian, not too bad was of course to his standards. To General Pei it would be a completely different story. Xie Lian remembered another thing and said, "Oh yes, Ling Wen, how goes the search for the boy with the human face plague from Mount Yuzhen? Do you have any news?" "I'm really sorry, Your Highness. I don't have anything at the moment. We're working on it," Ling Wen replied. Even for a heavenly official, to find a person in such a vast world was not an easy task. Although the heavens may be faster, it was still only a difference between 10 years in the mortal realm versus 2 years in the heavens. Xie Lian could only express gratitude. "Thank you for your hard work." Just then, they reached the end of the avenue, and a majestic palace came to view before him. The palace had stood through the ages, yet it only showed enduring excellence, and none of its antiquity. Layers of glazed golden shingles pyramided blinding in their scintillation. Xie Lian raised his head and glanced at the Great Martial Hall, beneath the golden roof. The words written with power and with vigor were exactly the same as a few hundred years ago, unchanging. He lowered his head and stepped into the hall. Within, numerous heavenly officials had already gathered, in their own groups of 2 or 3, standing in silence. The only ones who mannered the hall were the heavenly officials who had officially ascended, all imperial sons of heavens or indomitable overlords, each bursting with spiritual might. They eyed each other in silent pride and judgment, their splendor overwhelming. And at that time and place, everyone held their breaths, not daring to make a sound. On the throne at the very end of the hall sat a martial god decked in a pure white armor. This martial god was refined and dignified, his eyes closed and his lips unspeaking, poised and solemn. Behind him was the magnificent Great Martial Hall, but beneath his feet was a pure white snowy peak. As if sensing Xie Lian entering the hall, he opened his eyes. That pair of eyes were obsidian black but bright and clear, as if formed by the melted snow of a lake frozen for millions of years. When he blinked open his eyes, this martial god smiled softly. "Xian Le, too you've come." Xie Lian lowered his head in a bow and said nothing. When Junwu opened his mouth, he was not loud, but his deep voice echoed through the entire Great Martial Hall. Then, all the eyes of the officials focused on Xie Lian and he knew. Looks like this conference wasn't for discussing little General Pei and the Banyu Pass scandal. The highlight seemed to be him. Translator's notes. Junwu translates to, "The Lord, I am." Junwu calling Xie Lian as Xian Le is in terms of endearment. End chapter.